Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined, as always, by Jeff Cohen. Had a break last week, but now we are back together after our in-person, episodes a few weeks ago. We're back online. I am back in California. Jeff's in Charlotte, and we are here to bring you a little bit of everything today. We got a lot of updates. September call-ups. Now that we are in the month of September, two players called up to the White Sox to add to the two extra roster spots. One being one of the top prospects in the system, and Jairo Iriarte. Another being Zack Deloach, who was acquired this past offseason. We've got Nick Nastrini back in the major leagues to talk about. We've got Mason Adams back off the IL in Charlotte, in addition to two playoff races coming up. We've got Canapolis and Birmingham set to be in their minor league playoffs in just a few weeks from now. Canapolis next week, and then Birmingham the following week after that. If we have time today, we're going to do a Canapolis playoff preview at the end of the episode. And if not, if we go a little long on these early topics, then we will do both Canapolis and Birmingham playoff previews next week. So a lot to talk about today, and a lot going on the last few weeks of minor league season here. So we've got a lot of excitement. How are you feeling about everything, Jeff?
It's an exciting time, but also a little bit of a melancholy time. Last week was the last full weekly homestands for Kannapolis and Winston-Salem, and that's always kind of sad, as the baseball season winds down. But still a lot of stuff to get excited about. As you said, there are September call-ups. There's fingers crossed, maybe some additional young guys get called up. There's playoffs, and then there's the fall league, and we'll see who's heading out to Arizona for the White Sox. So yeah, still a lot of ground to cover here.
Yeah, definitely a lot of excitement. As we stand today, we'll go through the records. Obviously Jeff mentioned it. Last week now of the season for Kannapolis and Winston, with Canny still having the playoffs. Birmingham with 2 weeks left, then playoffs for them. Charlotte has a full 3 weeks left still. No playoffs in Charlotte, but very exciting. Final few weeks here. Time for that last stage of development for a lot of these guys. As we sit today on the September 2nd, Charlotte is 59-69 on the season. Birmingham coming in at 67-59. Winston-Salem at 57-69, and then Kannapolis rounding it out at 67-58. They are currently playing right now as well, the rare Monday minor league baseball game, which we don't see very often. So I know after we record here, I'll be watching the rest of that Canny game most likely. But an exciting time, two playoff teams coming up. But we will start here today with the two September call-ups. So as for those who don't know, in September, Major League Baseball rosters expand from 26 to 28, which allows teams to bring up two players, often prospects or just depth guys. Sometimes teams that are in contention will bring up more, depth to give their pitchers a break, things like that. Teams that are out of contention, like the White Sox, obviously, will give a chance to some younger guys. Interesting note here, the White Sox opt for two guys on the 40-man already. So Jairo Iriarte is a really exciting piece. Obviously, the second piece in the Cease trade, somebody that we expect to be in a big role in the future. He jumps all the way from Birmingham straight to Chicago, much like Drew Thorpe did, but will be used in a relief role. So the expectation and the word from Getz, from Bannister, from Sizemore, kind of just all the rumblings in Chicago, is that Iriarte will be used singular innings, so only one inning roles, and never pitch back-to-backs. So essentially, they're deloading him, but letting him get that experience at the major league level. It seems like, he's made every start this season. He's thrown a lot of innings. He's thrown, more innings than most of his career. Yeah. So kind of the route here with Iriarte is a fascinating one because it's not something you usually see, but he will get to the big leagues, jump over AAA entirely at a super young age, but will be used solely in one inning spurts with days off in between his one inning spurts. So he's probably going to throw a total of 10 innings, most likely in the big leagues. If that, it might be even less, frankly. But essentially, my guess on it is that you're giving him a chance to pitch at the big league level out of the bullpen, but then you're working him in bullpen sessions between starts, between relief appearances, right, with Bannister, with Ethan Katz. I think the idea here more is to mold him more than actually get him substantive experience.
Right. Yeah, and I'm thrilled. I'm sure you are too. It's a great move. Having him spend time with Katz and Bannister it's got to be beneficial.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's unique. You don't see typically, guys that come up and you put them in a bullpen role, right? Especially guys that they're projecting Jairo as a starter, right? Like this is not saying Jairo is going to be a reliever, right? Like the expectation is he will be a starter, but I think right now it's that you're going to give him some time to ease up on the innings a little bit, get more work in side sessions, get more, live simulated at bat stuff, not necessarily as much game work, but still give him an inning here and there of big league experience to feel what it's like to face big league hitters. It's really unique, but I like it. I'm okay with it. I'm here for it. I think he has shown a lot of good signs in the past in the past month or two, especially since the All-Star break. Iriarte has been just a much improved pitcher in many ways. I think the command is still definitely come and go for him. That's generally just how he's been this season. But he has a lot to like with the way he's been throwing lately, and he's someone who I think it looks like a real key piece of the future here, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great move. Just anxious to see a few other moves happen here.
That would be nice. The other guy, we'll get to that in a second, but Zack Deloach. Zack Deloach was acquired this past offseason in the Gregory Santos deal. Has had an up and down year. He started a little bit slow in Charlotte, but has been really good. He got a few little spurts in Chicago. But lately, Jeff, we both talked to him in Charlotte. You've been watching him play. He's been a different hitter the past month or two in Charlotte and really looks like he deserves some big league at-bats, yeah?
Yeah, he's deserved it for a while. I'd say for maybe the last 6-8 weeks, maybe since the All-Star break, he's by far been the best hitter here. He's really comfortable at the plate, having great at-bats and making a lot of good contact. Yeah, he deserved this by far.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a guy that, is, I mean, right now I'm just pulling up the August numbers. In Charlotte in August, Jeff, 978 OPS with, 16 walks and a good amount of 10 doubles in the month of August, right? Like this is just an overall really, really solid hitter. In total since, it's just been good. Like there was times, he had a really rough June. He had some good spurts early in the season, a little up and down, had a really rough month of June, but since then has really found his groove. An 815 OPS in July turned into a 978 mark in August, right? So he's been excellent for the last month and a half to almost 2 full months now, and really deserves some innings. I hope he gets innings. What do you think? Because right now you got in Chicago, I mean, Benintendi's been somehow the best hitter on the team since the All-Star break, which is crazy to say after the first half he had. And then you've got Luis Robert, who's still going to get everyday innings in center field. And you've got Dominic Fletcher, who really hasn't done a ton offensively, but has also been the most valuable defensive player on the roster. So it's an interesting dynamic there. Do you think, and you've got Sheets and Vaughn, the first base DH combo, how often do you think Deloach is going to play here down the stretch?
Well, that's an interesting question. He is in the lineup today as we speak. I'm not sure why Julks is getting at bats at this point. It seems like maybe they can just rotate the other four outfielders for the 3 spots, and then let Sheets and Vaughn alternate between first base and DH, and so that he gets a decent amount of at bats.
And I would be fine seeing Deloach get some DH at bats too, especially if sure. Fletcher's playing the defense he's playing, or even sliding Benny to the DH and letting Deloach and Fletcher play some left as well. I think you've got to find a way to get him some at bats. I mean, he's 26 years old, right? Deloach is not a young guy. He's been around. He was a college draft pick in 2020, so definitely a more advanced, experienced prospect who has had an up and down year, but has been really good now for 2 months straight. Like that's the type of player you need to give some at bats and see if he's worth being a roster guy in 2025, because you don't know necessarily yet. He hasn't proven himself at the major league level, but this is the perfect opportunity, like we talk about with so many of these guys, to get experience, to see what they have, and to go into 2025 with a better idea of what he looks like against major league pitching.
Yeah, it's 20, if they have 25 games, that's 100 at bats. That's not insignificant experience. And I will say it's been interesting about Deloach. If you think about it, his rep coming in was a power hitter, and the question was the hit tool. The season's been the exact opposite. He's shown a really strong hit tool, not as much power as we anticipated yet.
Yeah, it is interesting. Definitely not necessarily exactly what we've expected from him, but at least lately, he's been hitting the ball well. He's been line drive swing, kind of lining into the ball. I mean, he talked to us in Charlotte about how he wants to add a little more impact and has been working on that, but the doubles have been coming. The homers haven't been coming as much, but lately you've been seeing a lot of gap shot doubles from him, which is a great sign for where he's at as a hitter right now. So good to see him back up. And hopefully he will get at least 18 of those 25 games or so. That would be great to see, just for the sake of his development. Let's talk a little bit briefly just about the rest of this roster for September, right? The White Sox are on, they're in the middle of the 3rd longest losing streak of the season, and all 3 are by the White Sox. So pretty crazy that the 3 longest losing streaks in Major League Baseball this season are the same team. That really shouldn't even be possible, frankly. It's pretty astounding. But that's where this season is. That's where that's the reality. I don't like spending too much time talking about it because I just don't think it's worth it at this point. It really doesn't matter ultimately, but that's where we are right now. What do you think, Jeff, is just some of this situation with just not wanting to bring guys up that aren't already on the 40-man?
There are some instances. It's been a maddening season in a way, because there's sometimes that they make great moves. They bring up Cannon, and now they're bringing up Iriarte. So sometimes you think, God, these guys are on top of it. They know what they're doing. But now there's just no reason not to dump the veteran relievers, Poole and Anderson and guys like that, and bring up Coffey and Magoo and give the young guys their shot. And Ramos is on the 40-man roster. There's no reason not to bring him up. That's nuts.
And you've got guys. I mean, I think a lot of the logic. There's two things, in my opinion. There's two reasons. There's the money reason of not wanting to DFA guys and waste money, which is cheap and just doesn't make sense because it's such minimal money compared to what you're getting off the books this offseason that I don't really get it. The other side, I think there is this element. There has to be an element of just not wanting to subject these guys to this team right now. And I know that sounds so negative and sounds really kind of silly, but at the end of the day, I think there has to be some layer of logic in the front office's mind that's like, we just don't even want these guys playing in this type of situation where every single day is a loss and it feels really, really just hard to be around. I think that has to be part of it. I don't really agree with that. I think there's just a layer of experience that is valuable regardless of if you're losing every day or not. I don't know. It's odd to me, and I think it doesn't make a ton of sense. I think there's guys that aren't on the 40-man that could deserve it. I think Sean Burke's a prime example of someone who deserves a chance at the big league level. He fully deserves it, and it's just not going to get it because he's not on the 40-man, unfortunately. There's other guys, too, that I'm like, there's a lot of guys in this system, especially in Charlotte, who deserve a shot but are not going to because of the 40-man situation. So that's the reality of it, and it is what it is, right? Ultimately, it doesn't change anything drastically. But would I like to see a few more young guys up right now? I really would. But I am glad to see Jairo. I'm glad to see Deloach. Those guys both deserve it. And we'll see if anything else happens. I mean, maybe there's an injury or two, and then they're forced to bring up a Ramos or a Kai Bush again, or maybe they decide to add a guy like Mason Adams or Sean Burke. I doubt it, but there's a chance. You never know.
Right.
So we'll take what we can get with two more guys promoted, but it would be nice to see a few more young guys on this roster down the stretch here.
It just blows my mind if it's a financial thing, because we're talking a pittance. I mean, just nothing whatsoever. I mean, a rounding error for the season.
Yeah, exactly. So, you're completely right.
Anyway, we'll see. They've surprised us before. Maybe they'll make one or two moves and that we'd like.
We'll see what happens. But one guy that got a chance again, we saw kind of his best start of the season, I thought, in Charlotte when I was there in person, hanging out with you, and then after that he continued to throw really well the next two games. Nick Nastrini was recalled this past weekend, put together his best major league start to this point. Nastrini has really found something and has turned things around to a degree. I mean, I think there's a different layer of what he's doing as a pitcher right now as opposed to what he was doing, his first time around. The command was better, the stuff was better. He comes back to Chicago this past week, made his first start in 2.5 months in Chicago, right? His last start in Chicago was early June. Comes back up against Texas and throws 6 innings of 3 hit ball, 1 run on a solo homer to Corey Seager, 3 strikeouts, only 1 walk, which is a huge improvement for him compared to some of his early starts in Chicago. Didn't get the strikeout numbers, but was getting a lot of swing and miss. The stuff looked good. He looked comfortable. His pace was good. This is a guy that just looked like the version of Nick Nastrini that we saw in spring training, and we're hoping to, be a big part of the White Sox. And if he can do this for a few more starts, he's going to go into 2025 with a chance to really earn a key rotation spot moving forward, hopefully.
Yeah. And when you spoke to him in Charlotte after he had begun to turn things around, he attributed a lot of it to a mechanical change with his back leg. But I'm curious, in Chicago, did you see any change to his pitch mix at all?
I mean, I think in general, he's been emphasizing the curveball. That's what he was doing in Charlotte, and that's what he's continued to do even earlier, right? I think he is a guy that, has always had a slider he really trusts, and he's always had generally a pretty good, mix of pitches. His slider and his changeup have been more of his go-to, right? He's lowered the fastball a ton. He threw more sliders than fastballs, which I think I've always said is the key for him. He's not a pitcher that's going to get by throwing 50% fastballs. He can't. His fastball is not quite good enough, and it's not quite good enough located, right? Like his command with the fastball sets up everything else. And he's told me before, you have to set everything up with the fastball command. When he's throwing the fastball around the edges, he's really successful. And then he can hammer the rest of those breaking balls, right? Especially the changeup or the curveball and the slider. What he has to do more of is mix and match those pitches in counts that aren't necessarily like the fastball counts, right? Throwing the slider in fastball counts is when he really, really finds success and gets people off guard and in kind of, creates uncomfortable at bats for hitters, right? So in this game against, I'm going to pull up some savant numbers here because I definitely want to just look at where we're at. But he was just a different guy in this past game. I mean, it was very much a different type of game from him, and someone who I think, he looked like he was the full comfortable version of himself, and someone that was ready to just, attack the zone in a way that he didn't before. He threw 42% sliders, Jeff, and then turned that into, after 42% sliders, 31% fastball, 19% curveball, and 8% changeup. So 50% over, 60% of curveball slider for him when he was nowhere near that number in his first stint in the big leagues. The slider was exceptional. He got 8 whiffs on the slider. He got 5 whiffs on the curveball. So, a really, really good whiff rate, right? A 50% whiff rate on the curveball, 10 swings, 5 whiffs, 30% whiff rate on the slider, but he got 27 swings at the slider, which you have to have that pitch near the zone, right? So for him, throwing 41 sliders means nothing if they're not near the zone, right? The fact that he got 27 swings on those 41 sliders means that he's getting those sliders in a position where they're attempting enough pitch to swing at. They're very competitive offerings. Even his misses in this start were competitive pitches, right? They were pitches on the edges of the zone, just below mostly, just a little outside, right? They weren't just pitches that hitters can spit on at the major league level and not even consider swinging at. The Rangers were swinging at a lot of his stuff. Very excited to see Nastrini's second start this week. It's going to be a process, right? I don't think he's going to instantly become a star major league pitcher, but he's made adjustments to his arsenal, to his mechanics, to the way he pitches that has him looking like a legit major league pitcher right now.
Yeah, and it's been, as you and I both know, it's been such a rough season for him.
100%. He knows that too.
Yeah. So it's great to see, and really a testament to how smart he is and how hard he works, that he's figured out how to turn this thing around.
100%. So very excited that he's on the roster again. Obviously, he was already on the 40-man, so it was good to see him, get the rebump to Chicago. But, he's got 4 starts left here in the major league season, probably maybe 5, I think, with the way the schedule works out. So 4 or 5 starts here to really just correct the course and show that he's a big league pitcher moving forward. Because we didn't see that early in the year, and we know what he's capable of. The stuff is exceptional. He's a smart pitcher. He knows what he's doing. But now he's got a real shot to prove that he belongs at the major league level over his next 4 or 5 starts. Heading to Charlotte. We've only got one guy to talk about in Charlotte. We've talked a lot about Charlotte the past few weeks. We've been over some of these relievers we want to see up, and Brian Ramos, obviously, and we talked a lot about Colson last week when I was talking with Dylan Barnes. But right now, we're going to talk about Mason Adams. Mason Adams missed 2 or 3 weeks, I believe, with his injury. He got hurt in his first start in AAA since the promotion. He was out of commission for a few weeks, but was throwing, getting himself back in shape from a back injury. He returns to the mound this week. He got a home start finally, 20 days after his first AAA start. He gets a home start for Charlotte. And on a limited count, right, he was going to be limited in pitches. He was only set to throw 3 innings no matter what, but it was just Mason Adams. It was great to see him out there again. 3 innings, no runs, no walks. That's what you get from Mason Adams. It really is. He's going to give up some hits. He's not going to be a guy who never lets on base hits, but he just pounced the zone. He looked comfortable. He looked healthy, and I'm excited to see a few more starts from him now.
Yeah, and I was at that game. It was my first live look at him, really since back in the early days in Kannapolis when he wasn't even on the radar. And it was brilliant breaking pitches, a lot of effective sliders, a lot of effective curveballs. Only one 4-seamer, one fastball in 3 innings. So it was terrific to see, and it's great that he's back off the injury and healthy here at the end of the season.
Yeah, 100%. And Adams is a guy that's going to be effective because of his mixing and matching and his junk, right? Like he probably, I don't think he needs to throw many 4-seams at all. I think at this point in his career, the sinker has gotten better results, and both his breaking balls, the curveball and slider are a big emphasis for him. So Adams is a guy that I think, he deserves to be, in AAA, right? He's proven it. I think without the injury, he would have had a chance to break in Chicago, but maybe not because of the 40-man situation regardless. But, either way, he deserves to be where he's at right now, and it's good to see him healthy. And I think getting 3 more starts for him, the rest of this season is going to be really, really cool to see kind of just what he's building on and what he's grown at. Even in 3 weeks, right, being in AAA, even if he was injured, right, he was still learning, he was still thinking, he was still working with the coaches in his bullpen sessions, right? So I'm excited to see 3 more starts from him. And this is a guy that I think, could be a surprise opening day roster guy if he really, has a strong spring and continues to finish out this year strong as well.
Yeah. And before we move off of Charlotte, just one quick note, they're 59 and 69 and just 10 games under 500. And I say just because that's a dramatic improvement from the last 2 or 3 years. And it's been a much more fun team to watch, the most fun team to watch I've ever seen in Charlotte in the last 5 years, because they're bringing up all the young guys, Colson and Ramos and Jairo, And the reason I think they've been effective is they've just been bringing up all those young pitchers from Birmingham, and they've been competitive, and along with some guys who were here like Sean Burke and Johan Dominguez. It's been much better pitching this year, and as a result, much better games and more competitive games.
Yeah, 100%. It's been a different team, right? It's just been a way better team and more fun to watch this year. And I think that shows that there's some talent on the way. Obviously this season has been brutal in Chicago, and I'm not saying it's going to be that much better next year because it's going to be a lot of young players, but at least it's going to be a lot of young players, right? Like that is the biggest difference, where you're going to see even more youth and you're going to see even more talent, and hopefully guys emerge as big league regulars, right? When you get these guys in the big leagues next year, we're hoping to see a lot of them really establish themselves as pieces of the future moving forward. Heading down to Birmingham, we've got a little promotion, Jeff, that I got word of this morning, and I by the time this comes out, we'll be out there. Rikuu Nishida is heading to Birmingham, from what I've heard, which is pretty crazy because this is a guy who has played very few games. I believe it's 26 games in Winston-Salem. He played the majority of the year in Canapolis. He was kind of the last one of his group of college draft picks in Canny to finally get the bump this year after being a draft pick last year. But he was good in Canny. He's such a unique player, very different than anybody you're going to see. The impact is questionable, right? Like we're not sure if he's ever going to have enough offensive impact to be a big league piece. But Rikuu in 26 games in Winston-Salem is hitting 337, has a 436 on base percentage, 10 steals, 16 walks in 26 games, right? So he's the guy, like if you get this guy on base, he's going to do damage, and he gets on base all the time. He's not going to slug, right? We're not going to see him hitting home runs. We're not going to see him hitting doubles even. He doesn't have a single double in Winston-Salem. He's got 33 hits, and it's 1 triple and 32 singles. So you're not going to see much more than singles from him. But if you got a guy who's getting on base who has a 337 average, even if they're all singles, if he can get on base and then also walk a ton and steal bases once he's on base, it's a really fun profile. And I think Birmingham is gearing up for the playoffs, and they're going to add a super versatile, fun piece to that roster.
Yeah, and as he moves forward to Birmingham, Charlotte, and maybe the major leagues, he's versatile. He can play the infield and the outfield. He can come off the bench and pinch run. So he's got some added versatility. But I have been saying this for a long time. I've just been so anxious to see what he can do in Birmingham and what he can do in Charlotte, what he can do in the upper levels of the minor leagues. Because the high A and low A were no challenge to him whatsoever. So I can't wait to see what he can do in Birmingham. And I think the more I think about it, the more effective I think he's going to be.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I completely agree. I think he's going to be, a serious threat. I think he's going to be a fun player. And at the very least, you're going to have a guy in the playoffs that can give you some really cool at bats, can steal a bag, can set up, work a pitcher for 18 pitches, right? Like we see this guy foul off a ton of pitches too. Like that's a valuable piece to have in any lineup, even if he's, hitting in the bottom of the Birmingham order for the playoffs, right? Like make the pitcher work and force them to make mistakes on the base paths and all those other things that he does really well. And it's going to be fun to see what he has to do there. And, we'll do a full preview of the playoffs for Birmingham next week, but another guy added to that roster. A few guys to talk about in Birmingham additionally. Tyler Schweitzer, with probably his best start in Birmingham this past week. Schweitzer is a guy that I think he gets perennially underrated. Is that fair, Jeff? I think this is a guy that we don't even talk about enough, I think. And I get it because the profile is definitely more of a floor, less of a ceiling guy, but we've seen guys like that, like Mason Adams, that have become, high-end prospects. Schweitzer is a back of the top 30 guy. It's not an overwhelming profile, but he's just putting up numbers between Winston and Birmingham. He's maintained the exact same numbers, mid to high 3 ERA type of guy. He had a 3.74 in Winston. He has a 3.77 in Birmingham. So he's maintained exactly his same level of results. He doesn't walk a lot of guys. He records a lot of strikeouts. I mean, his strikeouts have actually gone up a good amount in terms of strikeout rate in Birmingham, right? In Birmingham, he's got through 76 innings, he has 78 strikeouts and only 20 walks. This is a guy that pounds the zone. He's going to get hit sometimes. He gives up some homers, right? 11 homers given up on the season between the two levels is a little higher than you'd like, but Schweitzer just pounds the zone and gets outs and is coming off of, his best start of the season, in which he just threw, what was it, just yesterday? I think yesterday he threw a 4-hit shutout across 6 innings for Birmingham.
Yeah, he's definitely been one of the big surprises, big pleasant surprises this year. And you're right. I think we did undervalue him a little bit because he was in the same class as Peyton Paulette and some other higher profile guys. But it's so great to see that when a guy goes from one level to the next and just doesn't miss a beat, because we see the opposite happen quite a bit. So
100%.
Yeah, so he's been really effective
Yeah.
up there and been just a wonderful surprise.
You're looking at a guy that I think will probably lead at least to start the season will probably be the number 2 behind Noah Schultz in that Birmingham rotation, with a shot to be in Charlotte pretty early next year. I think, if not off the bat, frankly. I mean, if a handful of those Charlotte guys crack the opening day roster in Chicago, he could be a candidate for Charlotte, and if not, then he'll start as the top 2 guy in Birmingham and get to Charlotte quickly. So he's really put himself in position to be at least big league depth going forward for this organization. The next guy we talked about a lot last week with Dylan and I just want to give some stats. In August, Jeff, Peyton Pallette, 18 innings pitched, 7 hits, 5 walks, 24 strikeouts, not a single run allowed in 9 2-inning spurts. He's thrown exactly 2 innings in every single game in August, has not given up a single run, and has allowed just 7 hits in 18 innings.
Yeah, I saw his most recent box score where he had 2 shutout innings, and I thought, God, this guy seems to have a lot of 2 shutout innings. Let me go back. Let me go look at his game log, and it's like almost all the way back to July 1st. I mean, it's just nothing. But I think what did he have? Like maybe 14 or maybe now 15 2-inning stints in the last 2 months. And I think maybe gave up 2 earned runs in that.
Since moving to the bullpen, Peyton Pallette made his last start in Winston-Salem was on June 28th, and he gave up 5 runs across 3 2/3 innings. He moved to the bullpen at the beginning of July. Since the beginning of July, as a relief pitcher, he has allowed 2 runs across 31.2 innings of work out of the bullpen. It is unbelievable what Pallette is doing, and it's not to be. I get it. Like, I understand it feels crummy that a second-round pick is already moving to the bullpen. I don't care, Jeff. This is a legitimate closer prospect. Like, I'm talking, like, there's not many guys with the type of stuff Peyton Pallette has in short spurts that can do this and produce this type of results too. Yes, there's going to be some ups and downs, right? Like, it is still. I'm curious to see with the 2 innings if they try to stretch him out again as a starter next year. I wouldn't even bother, frankly. I think he's just been too good. It's not like some guys that you move to the bullpen temporarily, you see them, progress, but they're still kind of around the same guy they were as a starter. You try to move him back in the starting role. This is a different pitcher. He's an entirely different pitcher, knowing he has 2 innings to work. He can rev up the velo a little bit. He can really trust his stuff. Pallette has been the best relief pitcher in the system for 2 full months now since he moved to the bullpen. And I think this is a guy that you can potentially see as a late season call-up next year in the big league bullpen if he keeps doing what he's doing right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If he can replicate this next year, he's going to move quick, and he should. He's
going to be in Chicago. Yeah, he will be in Chicago next year if he keeps doing this, because this is exceptional right now. I think he's, he looks like a back-end reliever. He looks like somebody who can legitimately be a major league setup closer, potentially. One of those two, in the future. So another guy to keep an eye on. We've talked about him a lot, but just has been great. The last guy in Birmingham to mention briefly is Wilfed Veras. Veras is, obviously has a tough profile, and we've talked about him before, as he strikes out a ton, he swings at just about everything, but man, can he hit the ball. The exit velos are exceptional. The power is great. Across 27 games in August, Veras had an 861 OPS with 5 home runs, 3 doubles, 14 walks. That's a big thing for him. Higher walk rate in August than any month of his career to this point. So that is one thing to note with Veras, right? You look at the past few months. June, he had 7 walks, 27 strikeouts. July, he had 4 walks, 20 strikeouts. August, in 27 games, 14 walks and only 21 strikeouts. That's a big improvement for Veras. So there is still work to be done there, but if Veras can become even a decent walk rate guy, similar type of thing with Tim Elko, right? Like, these are guys where if they can walk at an 8 to 10% clip as opposed to the 3% clip they've been at most of their career, then you're looking at a legit piece. And this is someone, Veras has found himself a little bit in the outfield. He still is generally struggles defensively, but he seems like he could play right field at the next level. And if he's able to get on base at a 380 clip like he did in August, and with the power he has, then you're looking at a real prospect potentially.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as you were running through the stats and talking about his strikeout walk issues, it made me think, Tim Elko's in Charlotte with the same issue. George Wolkow's in Kannapolis, the same issue. Wes Kath in Winston-Salem, the same issue. These are all big power guys. Certainly with Wolkow, he's 18, so, you see some potential there to change, but some of the older guys, if they can just figure out how to walk, they've got the power.
Yeah, 100%. That's how it is with a lot of power guys. And Veras is someone that I've always been a fan of Veras. I think he hits the ball incredibly well. His swing really lets himself tap into his strength and his his raw brute strength. He really gets into it at times. It just needs to be the approach, and it's been much better the last month. So somebody that I think is going to be worth keeping an eye on. I think he could be a guy in Charlotte most of next season. I think he could really mash in that Charlotte stadium, and be someone that if he can continue to develop the approach, could be a big league piece come 2026 and beyond potentially. Going down to Winston-Salem, we've got a bunch of pitchers there. That Winston-Salem rotation has all of a sudden become incredibly fun. Aldrin Batista got there a few weeks ago and has been lights out the past month since getting to Winston-Salem. Hagen Smith has now made 2 starts. Seth Keener comes off the IL. Lucas Gordon has been consistently solid. That's a fun rotation, Jeff. Let's start with Seth Keener. Seth Keener, we saw the stuff was excellent in Kannapolis earlier this season. He gets hurt. He goes down. Pretty rare to see a guy come off the IL with an immediate promotion, but it's happened with a lot of, the way the system's at right now, like he was obviously too good for Kannapolis even before the injury, right? So I think him being healthy now, he got a few times and he threw a few times in Arizona to get himself ready. And they were like, you're ready for high A. So he goes to Winston-Salem, a rough but it's 1 start. I'm not too worried. Goes 2 innings, gives up 5 runs, strikes out 2. First start back, he was going to be limited regardless. Definitely couldn't quite find his spots. But Keener's another guy that it'll be really good for him in his development to get 3-4 starts down the stretch here. Well, I guess only 2 more starts in Winston at least to finish out the season.
Right. Yeah. And a couple of thoughts here. One, this is the Canapolis rotation that won the first half of the season for Kannapolis. All but Jake Peppers is now in Winston-Salem, and they were all very dominant in Kannapolis. And it's great to see so many of them not missing a beat when they go to Winston and, pitching really well. So it's that same rotation. It's going to be a fun one to watch as it continues to move up the ladder.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're looking forward to just seeing how all these guys progress. You saw Lucas Gordon in person. I know you've seen Gordon a few times this year. What have you seen from him in terms of just where he's at now compared to where he was at earlier this season?
Well, I saw him just pitch a fantastic game, just a great fastball changeup combination. It was his 23rd start of the season, and I thought at some point he's going to run out of gas, but man, he had plenty of velo in this game. He was sharp from start to finish. A lot of the canny pitchers who've gone up. They've all been really durable, knock on wood. And they've all, have their number of starts is into the 20s, and still they're hanging in there pitching well. And he was excellent.
Yeah, another guy that's just great to see, him continue to progress. I think he's definitely more of a floor guy, right? SEC, big high-level college experience, has that level of pedigree. The stuff is not overwhelming, but when he pounds the zone, he can be really effective and just force soft contact all the time. That's kind of the type of pitcher he is. So good to see all these guys from that draft class really taking, more steps forward right now. Aldrin Batista, the other guy from that early in the season canny rotation, it just keeps getting better, Jeff. It really does. I think it's hard to point at anything that Batista's doing and not be really excited about it. We talked a lot about him last week. You can go back and listen to that episode with Dylan and I, because we really dove into what Batista's been doing this season and how his arsenal has been playing. But 4 starts in Winston, 3 runs allowed, 23 strikeouts, 5 walks. It's just excellent. It's excellent across the board. There's really nowhere to poke holes in his game. Such a funky way to pitch. And his style is definitely very unique, and it's going to need a little bit more work as he develops, but the slider is exceptional. The sinker is really strong. The changeup has gotten a lot better throughout the season. So this is a guy that we're really excited about. And, he's younger than everybody else in that rotation in Winston already. And we could see him in Birmingham at 21 years old, he starts the season next year at 21 still. There's a chance he's in Birmingham before he's even 22 years old. So definitely a guy we're going to keep an eye on, and someone that has become one of the better pitching prospects in this system this year.
Yeah, definitely in the top 10 and maybe even close to the top 5. He's had a phenomenal year. And, looking at Keener and Gordon and Batista, you and I have talked about this a lot. Some of these guys are going to end up being in the bullpen, and that's okay, if they're effective. And some of these guys, in fact, Keener was an effective relief pitcher in college. So it's okay. And as long as they progress, whether it's as a starter or as a reliever, they're going to be helpful. They're going to be important pieces.
Yeah, you're 100% right. The last pitcher to talk about there is Hagen Smith. Hagen Smith, first-round pick this year. You got a chance to talk to Hagen. What were some of your initial takeaways from talking with Hagen Smith in person in Winston?
Well, the first thing I liked is uh, he has the starter's frame. You really like to see these big, strong guys, and that's him. And it was fun. I said, can you see yourself? And I was just kind of teasing him a little bit. I said, can you see yourself in Chicago next year? And he said, and he got a big grin on his face. He said, that'd be cool. He said, I've got to perform, but that would be pretty cool. But yeah, he's got the poise. He's going to move quickly. He looks like the real deal.
Yeah, it was a shaky second start from him. There's a guy who, the stuff is electric. I'm not worried about it, right? But he's got these 3 inning starts scheduled in Winston. He's got one more start now to finish out the year. He hit 2 batters and had a walk. The command got away from me. He only allowed 1 run, so it's not like he got lit up or anything. But, not quite the same as his first start, which was just electric. But at the same time, like, getting him some innings, getting him a taste is going to be great. And I think, him having a few innings in Winston probably gives the team confidence to send him straight to Birmingham next year because he's good enough to go straight to Birmingham and really dominate there, honestly. So I'm expecting him to get there next year, either right off the bat or pretty soon, and have a really strong year in AA and continue to push himself. I could definitely see him as a candidate, like an Iriarte, who could spend the year in Birmingham and then not necessarily as a reliever like Iriarte, but I could see him jumping straight from Birmingham to Chicago. I don't think this is a guy you even need to mess around with in Charlotte, especially the way the White Sox have operated in the past with top pitching prospects. I don't really think he needs any time in Charlotte, honestly. I think you're going to give him pretty much all of 2025 in Birmingham and then be ready and confident to get him in Chicago end of the season, or definitely 2026. He'll be in Chicago. So a lot of hope for Hagen Smith. Just a ton to like there. One hitter to mention in Winston is Wes Kath. Wes Kath, you mentioned him earlier when you're talking about this profile of guys who really hit, but struggle to hit consistently enough and do swing too much. Wes Kath had a walk off this week. It's really cool to see where he's at as a hitter because he's been in Winston the entire year, and I think that was the plan for him. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get a bump for the playoffs, honestly. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get a little bit of playoff time in Birmingham, honestly, but put a little more thump in that lineup. But even if he stays the entire season in Winston, it's been a rough trajectory for Kath, right? Like we can talk about it candidly, right? A second round pick and out of high school in 2021 has found it's taken him a long time to find his groove in the minor leagues. It's not perfect yet, don't get me wrong, but a lot of improvements this year. From last year to this year, you've seen, just a hitter that is as evolved as a hitter. The strikeout rate is lower. It's still high, but the strikeout rate is lower. The walk rate's a bit higher. 15 home runs this year, 20 doubles, another big week this week. So really cool to see kind of Kath's development throughout this year and him taking kind of the next step forward in his progression.
Yeah, you're right. Same story with Veras. Same story with Elko. They're progressing, and they get the strikeout rate down or the walk rate up. They've got a bright future. And you're right. It's great to see Wes. I remember seeing Wes when he got out of high school, and he's put on a lot of muscle since then. He looks a lot bigger, stronger. He looks like a pro player now, and he's a hard worker. So it's been good to see, and that'd be great. I'd love to see him get that bump for the playoffs in Birmingham.
It'd be pretty cool to see, even if he, does have some growing pains there. We're going to save the full Kannapolis playoff preview for next week. Next week's episode, we're going to focus entirely on the Birmingham and Kannapolis playoffs, as those will kick off next Tuesday. Birmingham is set to play 99% likely to play the Charleston River Dogs, which is the single A affiliate of the Rays. Really good team. Me and Jeff saw them in person a few weeks ago against Kannapolis. Really tough squad. Meanwhile, so we'll get into that next. But a few players to briefly discuss in Kannapolis for this week. Jeral Perez with an
All right, it looks like we've lost Elijah. I'm sure he'll be right back. But yeah, we were running through Kannapolis briefly, and it's a whole different team than was there at the start of the season. We've had a lot of promotions. Obviously, Nishida, Galaney, Connor, Eddie Park, and the lineup has pretty much turned over, and it's several of the 2024 draft picks. They make up the bulk of the squad, and it's exciting to see. Some of them are doing really well. Elijah, I was just talking about a lot of the 2024 draft picks who are now filling out the lineup in Kannapolis after all the promotions.
Yeah, sorry I cut out there for a bit. My connection's been a little wonky today. But yeah, it's cool to see those 2024 guys. I mean, the pitching staff and the lineup now, Jeff, is pretty much filled with that core of guys from 2024, which is awesome to see. Sam Antonacci's been kind of the standout offensively. He's been really impressive as we stand here today. He just got another hit to start the game earlier in Kannapolis today. He just hits, man. The guy just continues to hit. He just has been excellent with everything he's been doing. A little teaser that we're working on I'm helping Arm Layton work on the Just Baseball top White Sox prospects this week, and he's going to crack the top prospect lists for Just Baseball in terms of the White Sox prospects. He just missed the FutureSox list, but this is a guy who what he's done the past few weeks and his approach and contact skills make him a really interesting prospect to keep an eye on. In addition, on the other side of the ball, Aaron Combs has been really good. Aaron Combs is someone who, he got the save in the College World Series for Tennessee this year. So talk about experience, right? Like Combs has pitched at literally the highest level of college baseball and in the biggest situation possible. He's going to fly through the system, Jeff. I'm not sure if you got to watch him in person at all this week, but Combs is someone who, I don't think he's given up a run yet. I think he had two scoreless outings this week. So Combs is someone who I think, should really just zoom through the minor league system. I have a hard time seeing him being in Canny. I think he'll be there for the playoffs this year because why not, right? You have a playoff run, you get him a few more innings, right? But in Kannapolis so far, 4 games, he has 5 2/3 innings, only 2 hits allowed, no runs, 8 strikeouts. Combs as a reliever, right? He's probably going to remain a reliever. He could be one of the better relievers in the system in a year or two from now. And I think he'll probably be in Winston immediately to start next year.
Yeah, and I hope he's available for the playoffs because that's going to be a valuable arm. That's going to be valuable. Yeah. They're gonna need every inning they can get.
100%.
Yeah, and then speaking of you mentioned Antonacci, and I just happened to see a game this week, and I got to see the Nationals' top pitching prospect Travis Sikora, and he was filthy. But I will point out that Antonacci took him to the warning track on the very first pitch of the game. And he made everyone else in the lineup look silly.
Yeah, that's a fun bat to watch and keep an eye on for sure. One more guy to mention from Canny, Carlton Perkins, who was a 2023 pick, 15th rounder, at a community college, right? This is a guy who definitely had very little pedigree and was kind of one of those project picks. But the stuff is impressive for Perkins. He's coming off by far his best minor league start this past week. I think he took a pretty I think he had 3 no-hit innings to start the game and then gave up 1 run later on, but 5 innings with 9 strikeouts, nine strikeouts in, I think all of them were in the first 4 innings too. He was just racking up the Ks, really getting a lot of swing and miss on his stuff. Perkins is another young arm who has had some ups and downs, but now with 3 straight starts in Canny with 2 or less runs allowed. So pretty fun little pitcher to watch there, and someone who has emerged as a piece of that rotation and a solid one recently for Kannapolis. We will do an entire Kannapolis preview next week. So we'll go over the playoff roster, kind of what they're looking at. Birmingham, I want to do a Birmingham playoff preview as well. But any other takeaways from your kind of trip this week, Jeff? I know you were in Canny, you were in Winston, you were in Charlotte, especially. Anything you kind of, the extra stories that just stand out to you from this week?
No, I think we touched on the highlights. I was really cherry picking the starting pitchers. I got to see Mason Adams, saw Ricardo Brizuela for the Kannapolis. It wasn't his best game. I saw Alex Gordon and Winston. It's a lot of stuff to be excited about, a lot of good young arms.
Yeah, 100%. So Birmingham is going to play Tennessee, the Smokies, in the playoffs, which is going to be real tough because the Smokies have given Birmingham a really hard time this year. That's the Cubs AA affiliate. That would be kind of a cool little crosstown White Sox Cubs playoff matchup. Meanwhile, the Kannapolis is set, as we mentioned, set to play Charleston, bearing a crazy last minute change. Charleston's up by 6.5 games with I think 7 games left, so they'd have to get swept I think this week to not win. So that's just about wrapped up. Going to be really fun to see some of these minor league prospects, some of the best prospects in the system in a playoff game. I think we'll get, a playoff start from Noah Schultz. We'll get a playoff start from, some of the other guys, probably Schweitzer, potentially in Kannapolis. There's a lot of options there with Brizuela, Tanner McDougal, Jake Peppers. going to be a really fun time to get to watch some playoffs. We will preview those series next week. We will continue to talk about the rest of the affiliates. We'll have some Arizona Fall League coverage. I'm hoping to get out to Arizona. I should be there sometime in October to get to watch Grant Taylor and Sean Burke, who are confirmed as Arizona Fall League guys. There'll be more to come in terms of who's going to be pitching in the Fall League, but really just a lot of excitement across the board. I get it. The White Sox season's been rough. We hear you. We feel you. But there is some exciting content on the prospect side. So make sure to stay tuned with at FutureSox, daily highlights, everything you need to see with the minor leagues. You can check out Jeff's interview with Hagen Smith, all the other interviews that Jeff does down in Carolina at AAA Jeff. I am at Elijah EV8 for more White Sox stories, analysis, all of the above. Stay tuned with us, and we'll see you next time on the FutureSox Roundup. Thanks, Jeff.
Elijah, I'll see you next Monday night online, and then Tuesday I'm heading to Charleston.
There you go. Sounds great.